Namaskar. Hello, friends. Passing the buck to God is good in spirituality. Most of us must have seen a typical comedy scene in movies where the top man calls the next in line with a anyone out there for delegating a task. The second man in turn calls the third in line similarly. This goes down to the last man in the line who also calls similarly, only to find that there is no one next in line and that he has to do the job. So while all those above him could pass the buck stopped at the lowest level. In the corporate organizational decision making situation, this buck passing is considered as a lack of competence and courage to take decisions. Hence, buck passing is a negative in that context. However, buck passing is good in spirituality. Here is how. The Creator is the one who created us for His purpose to be served through us. So, regard the pleasures and pains as truly belonging to the Creator rather than to our limited body, mind, and ego. Pass that buck to Him. Let Him handle that buck the way He wants. Now, let us look at mind and the concerned spiritual ideas. Wise sages of olden times advised their disciples to contemplate on the spiritual principles rather than simply accepting them. I feel this can be misunderstood to mean that we should apply our mind to these principles and understand them in our own way. We need to be careful while applying our mind to spiritual principles. Here is why. The disciples of the self-realized sages of olden times were themselves sufficiently viragi, that is, detached from worldly concerns, and they were thus quite ready to receive spiritual knowledge. Their minds were like a tilled field that was ready to receive rains and then to be sown. However, most of us lesser mortals are likely to be still very much rooted in the worldly concerns. So, our mind is like an untilled field with a lot of wild bushes and grass. Such a field is not at all ready for sowing spiritual seeds. Another way of putting it as follows. Our mind is like a pot full to the brim with muck, the muck of worldly conditioning. If we pour spiritual ideas into it, they will not be retained and will simply flow over and out. In other words, when we are contemplating on spiritual principles, we may be unknowingly applying the yardstick of our conditioned ideas formulated on purely worldly experiences and logic. But since spirituality is completely different from worldly phenomena, this would be a wrong yardstick to use. As a result, we may tend to reject many spiritual ideas. The right way to contemplate on spiritual ideas is by consciously casting aside our conditioned intelligence, the so-called logical and rational thinking. Thus, when we empty ourselves completely, we will be ready to receive the right spiritual knowledge. Sadhana, that is meditation, as advised by a Sadguru, coupled with satsang, that is company of spiritually inclined people, and reading of Sadgranthas, that is spiritual literature, is the way to empty ourselves out of worldly concerns and develop a vairagya bhav, that is detachment. Even after reaching this stage, since we continue to be in the physical world, we may still likely receive a mixture of sat, that is eternal or spiritual, and asat, that is transitory or worldly ideas. We therefore need to be like a swan who can separate milk from a mixture of milk and water. A swan puts a drop of acid into the mixture that causes the milk to curdle and separate out from water. The swan then picks up the blobs of curdled milk, leaving water as it is. We also need to apply discriminatory thinking, that is viveka, to the inputs that we receive, which will act like an acid drop and separate out sat from asat, enabling us to pick up only sat and leave behind asat. Body manages itself, but mind has to be managed. Let me define mind as conditioned responses to the world and events around us by way of thoughts. I don't need to define body because it should be quite clear to all. If we observe closely, we will find that body keeps giving out clear signals whenever it is in distress. It is also reasonably flexible and adaptable within certain ranges. So, as long as we follow a regular routine with variations within the acceptable ranges, the body will manage itself. However, when the mind interferes, a situation that is otherwise manageable by the body can become unmanageable, causing disease or distress, both physical as well as mental. So it is necessary to manage our mind consciously. We need to watch the response of our mind in a given situation, especially a difficult situation. The response of our mind can many times be an over response. Also, our mind can go into a vicious cycle of thoughts like a whirlpool when faced with an uncomfortable situation. So we need to watch and analyze the mind's response and temper it as necessary. That can mean half the problem solved. Typically, when faced with an uncomfortable situation, our mind tends to imagine the worst. There is a saying in Marathi that can be translated as follows: what our mind thinks, even our enemy may not think. Not just that, but the mind simply remains stuck with those worst possibilities and unsuccessfully tries to shut them out. That is why watching the mind and analyzing its response can help. It basically amounts to taking the bull by the horn, as it were. Consider a simple example. Let us say you could not sleep well last night. Instead of the usual 7 hours sleep, you could sleep for only 5 hours. Now your mind will remain stuck with that thought that you could not sleep well last night. It will keep imagining that you will have acidity problem, and that is enough for your mind to go into a fearful mode. In such a situation, you should tell yourself as follows: the body has some flexibility. Even if one night I slept less, the heavens are not going to fall. For all I know, the body can take it in its own stride. If not, it will make up for it by sleeping a little more every day for the next few days. Or if it is weekend, I will be able to sleep in the afternoon and make up. Even going beyond this, you can tell yourself, even if I do get an acidity attack, I will take some antacid. What's there? Why worry about the acidity? That is taking the bull by the horn. You will then be able to put aside any further thoughts of the less sleep last night, at least until acidity attack does happen, if it indeed does. Basically, the more you are able to detach yourself from the physical, the more you will be able to control your mind. Mind is the crucial bridge for crossing over from physical to spiritual. A spiritual seeker, as the term suggests, is seeking spirit. Spirit by definition is not physical. It is beyond the physical, more than the physical. It is the source of physical. Spirit is subtle, while physical is gross. Can a gross object sense or grasp a subtler object? For example, can we grab an atom with a pair of tongs? No way. Similarly, a gross physical object like our body is of no direct relevance in grasping the subtler spirit. So a spiritual seeker needs an object subtler than body that can be the bridge between his physical existence and his spirit. What is subtler than body and that can yet act as this bridge? It is our mind. It is subtler than body, but it does interact with the body. In case of most of us ordinary people, mind is almost fully with the body, and hence it remains preoccupied with the physical world. However, it still has the capability to grasp the subtle spirit. That is the reason scriptures and wise men have termed our mind as our enemy as well as our friend. So, the crucial aspect of spiritual seeking is getting our mind to be our friend so that we can grasp the spirit with its help. It therefore means that our mind must be turned away from the physical to the spirit. Now, how this can be achieved may vary. Different thinkers and practitioners have evolved different practices. Some of them lay much more emphasis on the physical aspects. For example, Hatha Yoga yogis practice yogasanas, that is physical postures coupled with mind control, which are primarily physical. Some others focus on meditation, which is more a mental thing than a physical one. Some others recommend chanting God's name or mantra, that is a holy incantation that is supposed to have special power to take man closer to God, or jap, that is repeating the name of God, typically over a rosary of beads, while others ask us to concentrate on breathing. The more religious types prescribe elaborate pujas, that is ritualistic worship of a deity, and other such rituals, so on and so forth. However, it is important to realize that the basic objective of all these practices is to get our mind away from the physical world and to get it interested in the spirit. So one should follow a practice that suits oneself, the physical aspect of that practice being immaterial. The test of the efficacy of the practice is its effect on one's mind, whether the mind is able to turn from the physical to the spirit. If what we are doing as a spiritual practice fails this test, then it may not serve the purpose. For example, performing puja, that is ritualistic worship, while the mind is completely engrossed in some problem at the workplace, that may not serve the purpose. Or entrusting the job of performing daily puja at home to a priest, or sending some money to a particular holy place for some yaga or fire ritual, or some such ceremonial ritual to be performed there in our name, or fasting one day a week by simply eating special fasting food instead of the regular food, though sitting down as much as possible to remember God is the basic purpose of observing a fasting day. At best, these acts may give you a sense of satisfaction, a little stability of mind, if the mind had earlier been disturbed or agitated due to something, but they serve no spiritual purpose. I will stop here today. We'll see you the next time. Until then, take care. Bye.